First of all, welcome Your Excellency Dr. Maeen Abdul Malek, the Prime Minister of the Government of the Republic of Yemen. You are welcome to the program Yemen in International Media that is organized by Sana Center. We have the pleasure and honor of having you. This is the first interview with you after your return to Aden. And this is an opportunity for us to raise questions about what the current Yemeni government is doing. Dr. Maeen, of course, you are in an unenviable position. I had the pleasure of visiting Aden after the attack on Aden airport. I had 4 hours discussion with you in Maashiq Palace, and I have realized that you are in a tough situation. We had to move about 3 times in the within the palace in order to avoid any attacks or targeting. This is one of the hardships that you are enduring. So first of all, we want to hear from you, from your side, about what Dr. Maeen Abdul Malek is doing and what the government of the Republic of Yemen is doing. Thank you, Majid. And I'd like to salute all the participants with us today and the opportunity to meet today with the international media or the focus and attention on Yemen, especially with the recent developments, the formation of the national unity government that encompasses all political factions, with the exception of the Houthis, of course. This is an improvement, or this is a progress that was made after the Riyadh agreement. And as you have stated at the beginning, the priorities of the government are key here. The arrival of the government in Aden airport coincided with a terrorist attack that was shocking for all of us, the Yemenis and the world at large. After 6 years of war, Yemenis are looking forward to this government to build peace. And before the formation of the government, when we had the discussions with the P5 ambassadors and the international community, everyone is counting on this government as the first step towards peace and to restore political consensus in Yemen and to have a government that is representing the broad political spectrum as a step towards peace. No one imagined that the Houthis would have the intent of attacking the airport at the time of the arrival of the government. It was a plot to attack the aircraft parking, number one, and thankfully it missed the target because the aircraft was in a different position. But of course, sadly, the missiles that hit the airport resulted in martyrs. Civilians were killed. And it was extremely shocking for us. There were some victims from the ICRC, citizens, and members of the local government. And for hours, the cameras of media were focused on it. Everyone was talking about, yes, the exact timing of the arrival of the government. It was disclosed, but no one expected that it will be targeted in such manner. And media was witnessing that. This was shocking. This government is not for part of Yemen. This is a government that is for the whole country, and it has different political factions in it. And we have had very lengthy discussions until this government was born. So to normalize the political life in Yemen, or having the Yemenis produce a government for them to stabilize the situation in the country, because there are difficult fronts in Yemen, the economic, the political, and the security fronts, and these are all difficult. We'll be talking about the security aspect when we talk about the listing of the Houthis as a terrorist organization. The key was that this government is representing different factions, The investigations have indicated that the Houthis are culpable, are responsible for that attack. The same missiles have been used before in attacks against Marib, and the Houthis admitted those attacks at that time. So now what is important for us, many of the attendees today, some of them have deep knowledge about the situation in Yemen, some of them may not. What are the causes of the conflict in Yemen, and what are the potential solutions for us, or the horizon for solution? Very quickly, we can discuss it and say here that for every country that has internal conflicts, it is unique. Every conflict is unique. In Libya, for example, the conflict is between forces that were created after the fall of Gaddafi regime. And for the situation in Yemen, probably the conflicts that we had in the country before 2011, we had 6 wars with the Houthis, and I have visited Saada in 2003, 2004, before that war erupted, and it was a beautiful city. And now, as a prime minister for Yemen, I receive reports about polio cases, for example, in that governorate, which has become a mobilization point for fighters, for recruits, the Houthis. And the first emergence of polio cases in the Middle East was in Saada, in that city. The relief agencies were not able of forcing them to have vaccination programs for children in Saada. 2 days ago, I have received reports about the spread of polio and other diseases in Saada, which is controlled by the Houthis. This is problematic. Yemen is now living in the Middle Ages because of this extremist and racist group. It is they believe that immunization campaigns are Zionist and America-led plots against the country. So what is happening in Yemen is something that is exceptional, unusual. To have a group with this ideology, with this mindset, this is problematic. At the beginning of the National Dialogue Conference, when the Houthis were part of it, some political parties and factions were saying that we have to apologize for them for the 6 wars, and others were saying that the Houthis cannot be part of the political process. And then we discussed the transitional justice and the reconciliation and the integration of the Houthis in the society. So we have had lengthy discussions about that. And you, Majid, and others, you are aware how these discussions were organized, and we have had lengthy discussions during the NDC. But the Houthis who were with us in the NDC, were they in their individual capacity, or is there an ideology that is behind? We have seen that they have evicted people, they bombed houses, and famine appeared in areas that are controlled by the Houthis in Hajj and other areas before 2014. So even in relation to the humanitarian issues, we have seen humanitarian issues in areas controlled by the Houthis, and we have had the first donor conference for supporting the humanitarian action in Yemen. That was before 2014, and that was because of Saada wars. And an official who went to Geneva for the first time, he told me that when we started discussing the humanitarian issues, I have realized that Yemen is slipping into a dangerous path. That was before 2014. And sadly, a lot of people view this thing, the future of Yemen, the political settlement or the economic and security situation, they view it starting from after the 6th war against the Houthis. When we say that we count on the government to conduct reforms, yes, it is important, and the government can do some reforms in some main aspects. In 2018, when I became a prime minister, there were fears of a humanitarian crisis and famine, and I have meetings with the Secretary General, Undersecretary for Humanitarian Affairs, and we had these fears. So the government started a program to pay the pensions to the retirees, the pensioners. We started with 38,000 pensioners, and we wanted to expand it to 120,000 public servants. And there were discussions that the Houthis are not contributing, are not bringing the resources they collect to the central bank. So 4 months after that, when the resident representative in Yemen for humanitarian affairs, when she visited Yemen, she said that the survey results show that the risks of famine and starvation have declined. The state cannot be administered unless there are institutions. And I do not want to enter into a lot of details, but just very quickly and briefly, I want to discuss the priorities of the government responding to your question. The economic and the humanitarian aspects are key priorities for the government in the future. Ending the coup and restoring the state, this is the overarching goal, because it is the cause of the suffering of all Yemenis. Without addressing the root causes of the suffering of Yemenis, we cannot end it. The military and security file is important, and here we need to make progress in implementing the Riyadh agreement. There is good progress, but we need to make more progress. And the things related to invigorating different state institutions, collection of revenues, and so on. The economic crisis, the global economic crisis because of the coronavirus is doubling the suffering of Yemenis. But we do have hopes that with many other factors in the region, these factors may help us to pass this stage. The security situation in Aden, you have visited Aden yourself. The situation is better. The governor and the local authorities are doing their best. And the government is fully functional, and the ministers are enthusiastic, and they are operating, and they are reactivating or reinvigorating their institutions. And this is providing Yemenis with a glimpse of hope. The government is a message of peace, and it is the foundation. It's the foundation for the stability of Yemen and the restoration of the state with all its institutions, and improving the humanitarian and economic situation in Yemen. For other issues, I will leave it to the questions, Mr. Majid, and we will respond to the questions as they rise. Doctor, I want to talk specifically about the implementation of the Riyadh Agreement, because one of the key questions is how comes that a government divided between political parties, how can it be effective? So you have different and sometimes contrasting political agendas, and how can this government be effective? You have started working in the government and you have conducted your first meetings with them. How can it be effective? Well, it is. It's not that this government is divided between different parties. This is a national unity government, we can say. And to the contrary, I believe that this is an opportunity to resolve many issues. When we started discussing the formation of the cabinet, the different portfolios and the shares of political parties, before that, I have requested that we discuss the priorities of the government. And these discussions took 2 weeks. I understood that without agreeing on the priorities first, the government cannot be effective. And therefore, we have identified or defined the priorities first. So the government started with a retreat. It's not the meetings that you saw on TV. We have started working in a retreat. We have discussed the different files and the issues the government needs to address. We wanted the ministers to understand the mandates of each other because it has to be a collective effort. So we have discussed the regulations of the cabinet and the different main ministries and their priorities. We have 19 new ministers, and therefore we wanted to introduce them to the mandate of the government, and we wanted to build a strong consensus inside the government first so we can overcome the future challenges. And it is, of course, an emergency government. As you understand, we are in a state of war and there are different conflicts in the country. So unless the government is effective, sometimes people view this government negatively, that it is a government of political parties that is divided, strongly divided. No, focusing on the priorities will eliminate the divisions. And the key idea for us was to have the government not an arena for the division of influence or fighting for influence. We wanted the different ministries to represent all Yemenis, and this was the purpose of the first retreat that we started last week, and it may end this week, and then we will have after it another program that may continue for a month. This is in addition to the formal meetings of the cabinet. And I believe the overall impression with all ministers is very positive. And I believe that we have created a different vision with them about the challenges in every file. And they are now keen to support each other so the whole government can succeed. So we have instilled a different culture for the management of this stage, and I hope we can have positive results. Doctor, I want to ask you, as after the return of your government to Aden, we have expected to see some regional and international support to it, especially regarding the currency depreciation. Some people were talking about Saudi deposit in order to support the government more. What is the level of the regional and international support to your government? Well, still no clear support is declared for the government. There is regional and international welcoming for the creation of the government, but we want to pass that to have a kind of tangible support to the government. This government is the first building block. It is a key opportunity for fixing things in Yemen. So far, no clear support was declared in terms of the economic side. There were some discussions before the government is formed. We are ready. We have a government team of concerned ministers, the finance and planning ministers. We have a clear vision about our priorities in terms of food security, the currency, and the payroll, salaries. As you understand, Majid, we maintained the payment of salaries for some civilian servants, but paying salaries regularly requires a lot of support. The issue of institutional reforms is being discussed. We are working on it, but it cannot be done overnight. And we have started that in the coming 2 weeks. We will have a number of reforms that will start in terms of the control over ports, the taxes, and some other reforms. But the support now from the international community and from the region is very important, and it has to be urgent. It cannot wait. Let me also ask a question. Where are women in this government? Why this government is free of women? Well, it is an imbalance in the formation of the cabinet, and this is because of the distribution of portfolios to different political factions and parties. I wanted to have a quota for women, but the parties and the factions did not nominate women. We tried to lobby with them, to pressure them, and we tried even to reach out to women so they can lobby with them. We wanted women to be represented, but this will be addressed. It did not happen, but it will be addressed in the future. If there are coming reshuffles in the government or any other positions, women will be considered, and this is the quota for women has declined because we managed to make certain progress in the NDC and up to 2015, but there is regression now, and I admit that. Okay, Doctor, I go to the hot topic. The U.S. administration announced the listing of the Houthis as a foreign terrorist organization, and your government welcomed that. But there were a lot of questions about the ramifications of this decision. Yesterday, in the Security Council session, the vast majority of agencies, the World Food Program and Lococo, they have issued very strong statements, and they said that this is a death sentence to Yemenis. What your government has done, or what will it do in order to mitigate the effects of this decision on the humanitarian affairs and the banking sector and the remittances and the transfers, and Yemeni banks are already suffering. So what are your plans in this respect? We have started establishing a high-level committee. We do not want to have any humanitarian impact for that. At the end, what happened is something that is deplorable, and it is an atrocity that is added to the atrocities of Yemen. And it's all because of the Houthis who brought it to the country. All the terrorist acts committed by the Houthis made them eligible to be listed as a terrorist organization. This was obvious from early stages. What is important is that the impacts or the effects on Yemenis should be mitigated. Concerning UN agencies and other international agencies, we have met with them, Beasley and Lukok. It is important not to send a message to the Houthis that they can blackmail Yemenis. This is a problem that we face because a lot of the humanitarian assistance was not delivered to those who deserve it. A year ago, there was a strong stance for UN agencies against the Houthis because the Houthis, before that, they have imposed royalties and taxes and things like that. Submission to the Houthis always gives a negative message, and trying to appease the Houthis will have very negative consequences. And we have seen that in the past. It is the Houthis are like who are pointing the guns towards the victims, and they ask for ransom. And this continues over and over. What we have started to do now is to study how this decision does not affect the humanitarian situation in the country. This is a country that has heritage and culture, and I have already spoken how was the situation in Saada and other governorates. Many governorates that are controlled by the Houthis now are very oppressive. I mean, you cannot have free opinion, people cannot speak, people are evicted, and because of the Houthis, the livelihoods of Yemenis were complicated and their movements and travel and everything. At the time when efforts were mobilized towards peace, and at the time where there were efforts from the special envoy and others, the government was targeted by the terrorist attack. I'm a survivor of that attack, and a lot others survived, but I have seen blood. The rector of Aden University was very close to us and he was injured. Many were dead, and all this proves that this group can do some indescribable things, unimaginable things. I mean, terrorist acts. Concerning the impact of this act or this resolution on citizens or civilians, we are trying to mitigate the effects as much as possible, and we have established a committee that will work to mitigate the ramifications. We hope so, because this is a source of concern. Let me ask a different question. What keeps you awake at night, Dr. Maeen? What is really concerning you about Yemen? You are in Aden and you have all these challenges. So, what are the challenges that are truly annoying you? It's not the security threat, not my personal security that is really disturbing me, and it is the concern that we fail in meeting the expectations of the citizens. There is high level of expectations. Even before the formation of the government, we are working in a very difficult situation. So the spectators would say, why the government is not doing this and that? There are a lot of files that we need to work on, and we need to work on them gradually so the state does not fail and we can have an impact. This question was asked to me the first day I visited the injured people in hospitals, as I was seeing the health situation for ordinary people in hospitals, the deterioration of the health situation, the livelihoods of Yemenis. This is really something that disturbing me. I understand that a lot of people lost everything, and the number of IDPs in the country is soaring. And I have been a prime minister before in a very difficult situation. Education stopped in the university in which I was teaching, and we were graduating, qualified people in the faculty of engineering. About 30% of the graduates of that faculty, 30% of them would travel abroad to work as engineers. The academic rating of that faculty or university declined. It was derated, and it is now a source for mobilization of fighters with the Houthis. And therefore, all these things are extremely concerning to me as a person, as a prime minister. Okay, Doctor, I will ask you one more question, and at the same time, I will request the journalists, if they want to ask the Prime Minister, they can raise their hands. But before that, I will have a last question about the security challenges. When I was with you in the Mahashik Palace, I did not envy you because of the continued threats against you and the inability sometimes to deter them. So, how this government is functioning while it is exposed in terms of security? As soon as I arrived to Aden, I understood that two drones were attacking the Mashik Palace. So, how are you functioning under all this? Yes, exactly. There were some drone attacks, and probably now many ministers are operating from within the city, not from the palace. The attempts to target the prime minister or the ministers are deplorable. We are in a war, yes, but trying to attack and to eliminate the government by the Houthis, it shows to what extent, how far they have gone. Because we have had discussions before, and so I said that the Houthis are not those with shiny faces who appear on TV and say political things. No, the the actors with the Houthis are different. Why this insistence to target the government and to try to eliminate it? For the security concerns, they are not really concerning us. The ministers now are living within the city and they are operating from within it. But after the formation of the government, we have seen increased threats from the Houthis, and this puts a question mark why there is an increased trend of threats by the Houthis. Is it because of the arrival of new Iranian experts? So, what is happening now shows to what extent the Houthis are ready to commit any acts to complicate the scene. And this makes the lives of Yemenis more complicated and makes the prospects of peace slimmer. If you want to ask, please, you can write it on the chat box or you can raise your hands. We have an Italian journalist asking, what is the future of the Houthis in case peace is reached? Well, for this, it depends on the Houthis. When the government forces were advancing in Hodeidah, and the government forces were besieging the city, and we could have taken control of the city in 5 days maximum. The government agreed then to go to Stockholm and to have an agreement to save the bloodshed. So the government gave some opportunities for the Houthis in Geneva 1, and in Biel, and in Kuwait. And I was a member of all these delegations. So the future is that if they agree to some objective conditions to be citizens with equal rights and obligations. When I spoke about the nature of this conflict at the beginning, you said something. Some may view that this conflict is a regional conflict, but we had some deep causes of this conflict before 2011. And it's the ideology, it is the fanatic and extremist thinking and ideology of the Houthis, which keeps them very far away from peace. If the Houthis decide themselves to accept to be citizens with equal citizenship, I believe the peace of path could be possible. We have references and we have international resolutions and we have the NDC, and I believe that the NDC is a key reference for us. So this is the path Yemenis agreed to. So we have agreed in the NDC to have transitional justice. and to have a type of reconciliation and accountability, not for revenge and vengeance, but for national reconciliation. This was the foundation of the NDC and the concept of transitional justice at that time. So these foundations are there, these pillars are there, and the Houthis, if they accept to be equal citizens in this country, and if they accept all the reference, and if they accept to coexist with Yemenis, then peace is reachable. Yemen cannot be ruled by a racist group like the Houthis. We have a question from Luis. You can open the mic and ask your question.
Yes. Good afternoon, Prime Minister. Thank you for this opportunity. It is a pleasure for all of us to have these insights from you. My name is Luis Barrantes. I'm from Costa Rica, currently studying at the Institute of Foreign Affairs of the Costa Rican. I have a question with regards to the regional and international support, because currently the president of the UN Security Council is Tunisia, which is part of the Middle East and Northern African countries. And ECOSOC is the current president of ECOSOC is the permanent representative of Pakistan, Mr. Munir Akram. So considering this relatively close proximity and some sort of, let's say, language and all these things that you have in common, which has been the approach to let Yemen be a priority for them, considering that they hold these two crucial presidencies within the United Nations system.
شكرا لك. هو السؤال عن الدعم. نعم.
The question is about the support. Yes, and having Tunisia as head of the Security Council, and will this represent more support to Yemen? What is good is that so far there is international consensus on the Yemeni file. There are no disagreements about how to deal with Yemen between between the international forces. There are no divisions in the Security Council and the United Nations, and there is always a representative for the Arab group in the Security Council. And yesterday there were some excellent stances from different countries, including Kenya, for example, and other countries. I believe here that the Yemeni file is viewed positively in the Security Council. There are small differences about the details on how to deal with some files.
ماجد أنت على ميوت.
سوري دكتور، في سؤال تحديدا من
Doctor, there is a question from AFBA about the government strategy in food security. What is your strategy in terms of food security? It is about reducing the cost of delivery of goods to Yemen and reducing the prices of commodities, because if it becomes difficult for importers to continue to import food, it will be problematic. And therefore, the deposit in the central bank was important to strike this balance for some considerable period of time, 2018, 2019, and in 2020. And number two, the delivery of these goods to seaports and then the delivery through roads. The road infrastructure, sadly, is really, dilapidated. And the currency is very important in order to stabilize the prices of basic commodities. This will have big impact on food security. The programs that are operating now, including the World Food Program, they cover small percentages of the population, maybe 5%, 10%, and there are issues about the distribution and things like that. It's very important, on the other hand, to maintain the economic situation in the food chain. We are working in the government on different elements related to food security. The Minister of Transportation, Minister of Planning were assigned to review certain things in order to reduce the costs of importation, the cost of containers, and the food access by citizens. So the issue of food security now is, yes, problematic because it relies on not only on the support from international humanitarian agencies, but it also relies on the economic support and create the supply chain, the importers, the distributors, and the sellers. Doctor, there is a question from Guardian. Can you expand about the plans of the government to control the seaports? What seaports you mean? Does this include Hodeidah? And what are the plans of the government to deal with the American decision? How fast these are? It's a very important question from the Guardian. But I may give you an example about how the Houthis are blackmailing others in terms of that. The Hodeidah seaport is open for the importation of food. And they were complaining that food is not imported. No, there is the UNIVEM, United Nations verification mechanism, and after that, food is delivered. We have supported the private sector, and food containers are delivered to Hodeidah seaport. So sometimes they claim certain things that there is closure and blockade, but there isn't. And they all the time try to mislead others and provide misinformation. The Hodeidah seaport is open for food imports. What happened is that even the revenues from the customs and taxes, we started to have them deposited in a special account with the help of the special envoy in order to pay the salaries of civil servants to reduce the humanitarian suffering. And we wanted even the United Nations to monitor that. We were very flexible from the government side in that respect. Concerning the plans of the government on seaports and border crossings, the problem now is in the collection mechanism and some controls. So we will send committees to different seaports and border crossings from the Ministry of Finance, the Central Audit Institution, Ministry of Transportation, and others in order to regulate the work in these seaports, the border points with Oman and the seaports as well. So there are reforms that we are planning concerning the seaports and the border crossings. Concerning The Hodeidah seaport, I have already said that it is open for the importation of food, and we are very keen to have food delivered from anywhere. The problem is that the Houthis, they are imposing levies on the importation of food, and all this increase the prices of food, and all these levies are used by the Houthis in order to finance their wars. The problem is that the Houthis, they use the densely populated areas as revenue collection areas in order to fuel and to finance their war. We have seen some famines and displacement in Sa'da that was controlled by the Houthis in early stages, and now the suffering has extended to other Gulf race provinces and to Sana'a. Many commercial and business institutions or corporations in Sana'a were threatened by the Houthis, and this affected the banking and the business community. Now, this committee that we have created will assist in mitigating the impacts on the banking sector and the remittances to Yemen, because Yemen is dependent on remittances from Yemeni migrants abroad. So it's very important here to discuss these issues with the financial institutions in order to prevent any kind of consequences or effects on the citizens. We have two questions from New Zurich, from Switzerland. A question about what are the conditions of the Houthis for peace, and the other question, how the GCC reconciliation, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Egypt, how will it affect Yemen? Well, the conditions of the Houthis for peace, I believe this is a question to them and to their representatives. As I said, the Houthi politicians say things that are irrelevant to the practices on the ground, what they do on the ground. We have had discussions with them. We have had agreements, and they were part of the NDC, and they were part of the Constitution Drafting Commission, and I was a member of that commission and its rapporteur. There are differences between what we agree on and what they do. Even in the 6 wars before 2011, we have had different agreements with them, and they always break the agreements. There was a kind of wisdom and flexibility from the side of the government, and the government was very receptive to solutions, but it is all the time that the extremists and the fanatics from the Houthi side, they violate and breach all the agreements. So for the Houthis and peace, this is up to the special envoy. This is a question to the special envoy. Are the Houthis ready to adhere to the references? Are they ready to comply with the agreements they were part of in terms of the Constitution and the National Dialogue Conference? Are they willing to demilitarize and lay down their weapons? So there are a lot of things that are required for peace, because the problem is that those who we have the discussions with from the Houthi side are not the decision makers on the ground. And concerning the GCC agreement, yes, the reconciliation, it will create a better environment for Yemen and for others. Therefore, we are accepting that this agreement between Gulf countries will have positive impacts on Yemen, because the region is really supportive to Yemen in terms of the economic and the humanitarian issues. And if the GCC house has fractures in it, it will impact Yemen and Yemenis. And therefore, we very positively view this Gulf agreement, and it will have positive impacts. I have a question from Laura Clark. She is asking, is the government open to the formation of a ministry for women? Well, I believe we have a different structure for empowerment of women inside the government institutions. This issue was studied in Yemen before the current government. We have the Women National Committee that is under the Prime Minister, and it is working to empower women in all positions of power. And what I have seen when I visited provinces in Yemen, the representation of women in local authorities is very small. And in the executive offices in provinces, the women empowerment is still very slim. In the head offices and headquarters of ministries, we have some good representation of women. But what is important here is to invigorate the Women National Committee and to provide it with powers in order to empower more women. And this is part of the programs of the Women National Committee. I have a question from Mohammed Mansour, Egyptian journalist. He's asking, what can Egypt do for you and your government to support you? Well, there is a lot that can be provided by Egypt because of the position of Egypt, the people of Yemen, historically and since the creation of the Yemeni state. The Egyptian role is always welcome, and we are receptive to that. Yemen is facing myriad challenges, economic challenges, daunting challenges, and this is the challenges we face are quite similar to the challenges Egypt faced in the past. So we need capacity building, training, and things like that. The economic model of Yemen and Egypt are quite similar. We are not a welfare economy, and we visited Egypt a number of times and we have discussed some details about the transfer of knowledge, especially as we see now in Egypt, there are major reforms taking place. And there is an important role for Egypt in the region, the Red Sea security and the Gulf of Aden. Therefore, the Arab region is important, and Egypt is a key component of the Arab region. And we want Egypt to be supportive to prevent the presence of any foreign entities or forces that may destabilize the security of the Red Sea. The help to the Coast Guards is also the assistance to the Coast Guards in the US and our other partners are involved in that. And Egypt has a role to play. The training of police and the Ministry of Interior is important. So with the reforms of the government that we are undertaking, we are envisioning a role for Egypt in that. In addition to that, there needs to be a space for the private sector from Yemen and Egypt to operate together, because we plan to rely on the partnerships with the private sector for service delivery and for key sectors, and this could be one of the fields of cooperation with Egypt. Okay, we have questions from Lauren Clark about the steps taken by the government to support the teachers and the students, and what is the future of education in Yemen with the changes in curricula. And another question about the actions taken by the government in terms of transitional justice and the psychological impacts of war. And we have also, Doctor, let me give you a package of questions. Question about the situation of foreign investments in Yemen. Will trade improve? And have you lost investments because of the Houthi attacks? And for our dear journalists, if they want to ask directly after we finish the written questions, then you can raise your hands and we can give you the floor. On the first question is a key question about teachers and education. Education sector is pivotal in Yemen, and for any country where the education system is collapsing, this is an entry point for violence. And sadly, it started in Saada and then it metastasized to other parts of the country. There was a plan last year, and in it we had Mark Lowcock as a partner. We wanted to make some allocations. 250 million US dollars from Saudi Arabia and UAE to pay the salaries of teachers so we can operate the schools in Houthi controlled areas, because we have reached out to 122,000 employees paying their salaries, and then the Houthis took certain decisions about the currency and so on, and this created a humanitarian crisis. So for the teachers, the plan was that we arrange the opening of LCs, letters of credit, and the facilitation of the food imports, and that the revenues in local currency are used to pay the salaries for teachers, about 170,000 teachers we have. And it was very important for us to restore the educational process, but all this stopped because of the actions from the Houthi side concerning currency and so on. And they are taking some preemptive actions in order to prevent any initiatives that we conduct in this respect. So this amount was to be paid directly without any operation costs to the teachers directly in order to maintain the educational system in Yemen. And this would have had a great impact on the educational process, so students do not drop out and do not join the warring parties. It is still possible to implement some of these plans thinking outside the box. So to divert some pledges to support the education sector in Yemen in the future. This is a top priority for us to reduce violence. For the foreign investments, yes, absolutely. The foreign investments declined, and we have seen capital flight in 2015, 16, 17. The GDP contracted by about 50% because of the capital flight, and the private sector is leaving the country, and the biggest foreign investment that stopped was the liquefied natural gas project that stopped, and there were some investments in the oil sector because the development of oil blocks require substantial investments, and some of the private sector capital left the country. Our plans in the future are about putting the investment issue as a top priority for the Supreme Economic Council, and this council will be reformed to combine energy and investment because we have key impediments for investments, including energy, for example, and we will be focusing on improving the investment climate in the future in terms of the legal environment or framework, the allocation of lands and things like that. We have businessmen outside the country who want to come back to Yemen and invest in it. This will be a key priority for the government to focus on, especially in areas including Aden, Mukalla, Shabwa, and other areas. But we will adopt a transparent approach through the Supreme Economic Council and the Council of Ministers. This is something that we will do in the future because the local economy cannot grow unless there are foreign investments. The growth of the government budget will be very slow in the future until we have major investments in oil and gas and other important sectors. And we need the creation of employment opportunities, and this depends on improving the investment climate. Although we are in a state of war, but in different parts of the country, these investments are possible. We have a question from a British Telegraph. With the STC in the current government, and it is still adopting the cessation of the South. It will happen, and what is the future of the STC? The common divisors are many, and the calls for the independence of the South are there before the National Dialogue Conference and after. So forming a government that is representative of different political factions may change something. This government is the government of the Republic of Yemen, and it is representative and inclusive of all political factions, and the priorities are clear in terms of the security, economy, and the military aspects. So we have agreed on these priorities. All the political factions agreed on these priorities even before discussing the distribution of the portfolios. And members of the government from the STC, they already were in different positions in the government, and they were representing the Republic of Yemen. So these discussions will remain there, but our key target or objective that we are focusing on now is to end the coup and to restore the state institutions. And any further discussions will have a different approach or pathways. So the focus now is on what brings the government together. And everyone now agrees on certain priorities, and we are all working to achieve them. If anyone wants to ask a question, you can, if you want to ask His Excellency Dr. Maeen, please raise your hand, and I will have a quick question in the meantime. There was a question about the Hodeidah seaport, and that there will be problems of the arrival of ships and the payment of fees. If they pay fees to the Houthis, it will be something that is paid to a terrorist organization. So this may prevent ships from docking in Hodeidah seaport. What is important is that commodities and goods are delivered to people. The issue of fees and charges, it could be in an escrow account that is monitored by the United Nations. There are more than one solution. What is important is that we do not allow the Houthis to use this file for extortion. We want to have a clear vision with the international community. The focus is to prevent any deterioration of the humanitarian situation, and we want to ensure the delivery of commodities. This is important. The other party is the obstructor here, and this is clear. For example, when polio cases appeared in Sada, the international community did not condemn the Houthis, although they are culpable for that. So for the Hodeidah seaport, it is very important to have solutions that are devised, and for the fees and charges, they are minimal. the charges on food imports are minimal, and they are not a key revenue for the Houthis. The Houthis rely primarily on the revenues from the fuel products and other commodities. So it's very important not to have the food imports affected, and we want to ensure that food is delivered with the lowest possible prices to the people. Doctor, you have this platform, you have these international journalists, and if you have three key messages that you want to deliver through them, what are these three messages? This is a very important forum, and the international community wants to see Yemen as it is, as a beautiful country as it ever was and is. And many journalists visited Yemen and they moved in it. They like it. So they want Yemen to be part of the cultural heritage of the world. It's very important for Yemen to be in the forefront of the attention in the world and to receive the support it deserves as an important country. And you have to view the conflict in Yemen not from the perspective of the regional interventions. We need to ponder the future of Yemenis and to think about it and our freedoms, because if we submit or if we cede to the attempts of appeasing a terrorist and extremist organization, Yemen as a country will be hijacked by fascist organization. Yemen is diverse. We have Aden, Sada, Shabwa, and Sana'a. Without this diversity, Yemen is not the Yemen we know. So what is depicted about Yemen to the international community should not be from the eyes of the international and regional players. They need to see Yemen using our eyes as Yemenis. And our aspirations in Yemen is to have a peaceful, prosperous Yemen, but there are some objective conditions for that. We are working to achieve these conditions. This government is inclusive and it is representative, and it has all the political factions in it, and all of them are Yemenis. And when the Houthis accept to be part of the social fabric of this country, this will be an entry point for reconciliation and recovery and transitional justice. And peace requires courage, and we are ready from our side as political leaders to extend our hands to peace whenever the conditions are met. Until then, it's very important for you as journalists to portray the true picture of Yemen and to listen to the internal voices from Yemen and not to listen to any regional forces that may have different perspectives. Doctor, we have Bill, a journalist from the Independent. Bill, please.
Hi, sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, yeah, okay.
Sorry, hang on a second. I just wanted to ask you, are there any hopes for an imminent round of peace talks with the Houthis? And apart from the Houthis laying down their weapons, what are the key demands or red lines that the new government will have of the Houthis in order to enter a long-term comprehensive peace deal And finally, I wanted to ask, how will you ensure that the foreign terrorist organization designation will not undermine those negotiations? Because people have raised concerns that labeling the Houthis a terrorist organization, the US designation, will impact peace talks.
هل سيؤثر ذلك على
Will this impact the peace talks? In my opinion, it will not have an impact. Now, there is a difference. It is either we have fragile peace or armistice, but then Yemen will have recurrent conflicts in the future, or to establish a long-term peace in Yemen. So it is it's about approach to peace in Yemen, and this requires a lengthy discussion to explain the deep roots of the problem in Yemen and how can we establish sustainable and permanent peace in Yemen, because it is very difficult to just summarize the political history of Yemen and limit it to the 15 past years. No, it's longer than that. And about the impacts of the listing of Houthis, it is related to the foundations of the sustainable and permanent peace in Yemen. And I had a partial role in that in the National Dialogue Conference. We have discussed it, but we have seen wars before that. We have had the wars in Saada, and there were some presidential committees that helped to mediate and to achieve kind of ceasefire agreements here and there. But then every time the conflict rises again. The listing of Houthis is something that is because of the actions of the Houthis and their mean terrorist behavior. And this listing should be pressure on the Houthis in order to be more inclined towards peace. It is not preventing peace, but it is a pressure on them in order to go to peace. And this is, the listing of the Houthis, this is the true nature of the Houthis. They are terrorists. What they have done to the people of Yemen and to the neighborhood and the international maritime, all this requires that they are listed. But let's think about the prospects of sustainable peace in Yemen. For a lasting peace in Yemen, we need to adhere to the references, because the references are the foundation stones for a political track that is inclusive in Yemen, and reconciliation, transitional justice, and de-arming. And all this was discussed in Kuwait with the military committees, and there are a lot of details in that. It all depends on the Houthis. But the messages from the international community to the Houthis should be clear, because the equivocal messages that are appeasing to them are not useful. They are a group that is inadvertent, and they really don't care about the suffering of Yemenis. But we still count on some wise people, maybe amongst the Houthis or others, who may at a certain point of time say enough is enough and enough to war, and who can work with us under the sponsorship of the international community to establish peace. Doctor, I know that we have the last 8 minutes. We have Beth from the Guardian. Beth, and then there is a last question from an Italian newspaper. Beth from the Guardian.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me? Yes. Okay, great. I just wanted to circle back around to the question I asked initially, which is, can we talk a bit more about this specific committee that's going to work to alleviate the effects of the Houthi terrorism designation? So can we have some specifics, like, you know, who's on it, what's it called, what kind of measures are they discussing? And I guess most importantly, how quickly can those decisions get implemented so that, you know, people can actually there can actually be something done to help people considering the designation that's been made.
أضيف دكتور في صحفية إيطالية القاعدة.
I just want to add from an Italian journalist, Al-Qaeda and IS in Yemen, how the government will deal with these groups, and then you can have the final remarks. For the question of Beth, it is important on what this committee will do. The notion is that the committee will conduct planning with the finance and the central bank. There are a lot of details here. The Houthis took certain actions and this impacted us. For example, the rules of compliance in terms of the banking sector and the banking control. So there will be open discussions between this high-level government committee and other interlocutors from the international community and others in order to have options and alternatives in order to maintain the fiscal and banking sector and to facilitate the work of UN agencies in Houthi-controlled areas and things like that. So everything related to these activities will be discussed. This committee is multidisciplinary from health, education, water, and other sectors. So it will be working relentlessly to address the ramifications of this decision and to prevent any further suffering in terms of the economy, the remittances, and things that are related to the legal aspects of it. So we are open as a government to discuss all these things, not internally only, because this high-level committee will work internally and it will have contacts with external parties in order to mitigate the impacts of this decision on the economy and the humanitarian situation. So we want the Houthis only to be impacted by it, not others. And the suffering of civilians from the Houthis predates this decision. People are already suffering from the rule of the Houthis. People may now just realize that there could be an impact for this recent decision, but they have not seen what the Houthis were doing in terms of the humanitarian aid for years and years. We know as politicians how the Houthis are interfering in everything, in the humanitarian affairs, humanitarian aids, assistance, and in health and education and in everything. And we know that the United Nations kept a blind eye on aid being diverted by the Houthis and given to those who do not deserve it. So the committee will discuss different options in order to deliver aid directly to the people. And as I said, a year and a half, when UN agencies stopped their operations, the Houthis retracted some of the actions they have taken. So this committee is far-reaching and it is multi-sectorial. And it is open also to deal with the United Nations and with international partners in order to think of solutions to deliver aid. What was the second question? It's about the challenges, the Italian newspaper Al-Qaeda and IS and how the government will deal with them. And then you can have the final remarks. Well, it is a double battle. It is our battle to end the coup d'etat and the battle against the terrorist organizations. And to a certain extent, with the improvement in the security infrastructure recently, we have managed to reduce the activities of these extremist groups. We have arrested cells in Al Mahra, and I visited Aden as a prime minister. We have opened a university there, and we have seen that half of the participants, or half of the students, sorry, in the university are women. So imagine how the situation changed from 4 years ago. So it changed, and the local authorities and the central authorities have helped in reducing the tourist activities. There are some sleeper cells in some parts of the country, and the Houthis are using them, and they are helping each other. The tourists are helping the Houthis and vice versa. And we have intelligence information that is telling us about this coordination. We have detected different tourist elements, and we have managed to drastically reduce their activities. But we still need strong security and intelligence support in order to strengthen our security institutions. In conclusion, Your Excellency, the Prime Minister, you can say whatever you wish to say. The future challenges before Yemenis are remarkable. The government cannot handle these challenges without the support of the people and the openness and the transparency towards our people in the international community. And this is what we will do in the future. In the future, we will be more transparent, and this government is for all Yemenis and not for part of Yemen. And therefore, people in Houthi-controlled areas, they were concerned about that terrorist attack because they knew that if the government was eliminated, it will destabilize Yemen maybe for years and decades to come. And therefore, it is very important to focus on the future and to have true national solidarity and reconciliation. And this is the focus of our work as a government. Despite the economic challenges we face, and now this is an opportunity for us, this platform, to tell you about what is happening and our challenges after forming the government and after the Riyadh agreement. We want to keep you posted about the developments in Yemen and the vision of the government for the future, and then for you to communicate these voices through the media channels you have. I have spoken very frankly and candidly about the challenges we face, and this government is a chance for Yemen to recover. And supporting this government is critical in order for the country as a whole to recover. This is a national unity government, and it is a government that was formed after hard labor, and therefore, this is something expected in the state of war that we have. But this government is a true opportunity, and everyone should stand with this government internally and externally in order to establish lasting peace in the country. Peace requires some courageous steps and actions. and I have briefed you about the priorities of the government for the coming years. But Yemen requires international support, and Yemen needs to be in the forefront of the attention from the international community. I'm confident that you will communicate this clear picture to your audience with all the challenges in it, and in the future, we will keep you posted, and we will keep you informed about what is happening, and we will establish communications with you, and we will be very transparent with you. This is a promise from my side. And our discussions today do establish new channels for us for communication with you. And this communication is for our internal audience, for Yemeni people, and for the international audience, and the people who are interested in Yemen, and those who want Yemen to recover and to restore its culture and its contributions at the regional and international level. Despite all the security concerns, and despite what Majid has seen in Aden, well, despite all that, we hope we can achieve something. For sure, that was an opportunity for me to see different parts of Aden. Thank you, Your Excellency, for this time that you have dedicated for us. We needed such a meeting in order to inform the international community and media about the challenges that are facing your government. And I'd like to thank the media team in Sana'a Center. I'd like to thank the translator, Mr. Basim Saleh, who struggled for an hour and a half to deliver the interpretation. And thank you for all the journalists and international correspondents who dedicated this time to interact with Your Excellency. And I do hope that we can come to Aden and to meet you in Aden with all these journalists, so they can enjoy the beauty of the city of Aden. Thank you, Doctor. Thank you, everyone.